Okay, so last week, Xavier Dolan, who's a Canadian director who's won a ton of awards, did this interview that went viral. He said he's done with filmmaking, he's tired of the process, and making movies just doesn't make him happy. Look, there was a strong reaction to these comments, and today you'll hear why Xavier's point of view was so controversial. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, let's get right into it. Xavier Dolan is one of the most celebrated filmmakers in this country. This is a director who's won both the Jury Prize and the Grand Prize at Cannes. He has won a César Award. He has won a bunch of Canadian Screen Awards. He's the director behind movies like I Killed My Mother and Mommy. So it was a surprise that he did this interview where he was quoted as saying, "Art is meaningless." The next day he said he was quoted out of context, but also he told everybody he wants to stop making movies. And his comments have sparked conversations about the state of cinema in general. Filmmaker and critic Chandler Levac is here. Cha Donlevy from the Montreal Gazette is here. Cha, Chandler, welcome to Commotion. What's going on?
I'm ready to talk about this.
I'm ready too. Cha, how you feeling?
I'm very ready. Ready.
Well, okay, let's start with contextualizing some of this. Okay, so last week it was reported in an interview with the Spanish newspaper El Mundo that Xavier said he was through with making movies. The quote was, "I don't see the point in dedicating oneself to telling stories when everything around us is crumbling. Art is useless and dedicating oneself to movies is a waste of time." Those are pretty big comments. John, I'm going to start with you. What is going on in Xavier's career that would prompt such a dramatic comment?
Well, a lot is going on in his career as usual. He's been very busy for the past 14 years. In 2009, when his first film premiered at Cannes, J'ai tué ma mère, I Killed My Mother, he was 20 years old. So that was 14 years ago. Since then, he's had 8 features come out. 6 of them have premiered at Cannes. He's won 2 awards. You know, he's also just a very dramatic guy, a very dramatic director. His films are very dramatic. He speaks very freely. He speaks off the cuff, and he's a very emotional guy. So he has highs and he has lows. These aren't the first time. This isn't the first time we've heard comments like this from him. I think he throws himself so much into his movies and so much into the process, and he's also so kind of. So emotional and sensitive that he takes criticism very harshly. His films have been they're either loved or hated, and he's had really harsh critiques for his films. Sometimes films that win prizes at Cannes are also films that get very harsh reviews. So people have a love-hate relationship with him. Just when I interviewed him in December, he was saying things very similar to this. He was saying he was getting tired of making films, spending 2 years on a film, and then in the end, like only a handful of people go into theaters to see it, or he gets these harsh critiques, and he doesn't know if he wants to keep doing that, and he wants to take care of himself, his body, his family, that he's tired. Yeah. What's different this time is that he said that he might actually that he wanted to stop, that he's made his last film, and I think that was a bit of a shock for people.
I can imagine it was a shock. Listen, I should contextualize this whole conversation by saying that when you were talking about the fact that he made 8 films in 14 years, Chandler was in studio here. You were just shaking your head like, my God, that kind of output. That's a pretty remarkable kind of output in that period of time.
Yeah, I'm 36. I've only made 1 movie. What's wrong with me?
Nothing's wrong with you. I Like Movies was a fantastic movie. But this isn't about that. We should say that when this interview went viral with Xavier, you tweeted at me saying, "Dear Lord, please let me talk about this on your show, Elamin. Why is he being such a baby?" Which is a great way to get on the show. I'm like, oh, Chandler's got a lot to say about this. Why did the comments rub you the wrong way?
I just think that he's so absurdly talented, and I mean, no one knows more innately how hard it is to make a film than me, but if you're making movies because you need to have praise and adoration, you're kind of in the wrong business, especially now. And how much more praise and adoration can a person have already experienced? Like, I just... I think, cinema is like a calling and a vocation, right? It's something that you're kind of compelled to do more than it doesn't make any sense, the process of filmmaking. It's so absurdly hard. And so I understand his passion, and I understand the kind of like feeling of maybe the futility of it. I think he's just burnt out. He needs a break, but he also wants people to realize that he still exists.
Right. Well, one of the things that sort of caught my attention in his comments was he said something about making a movie that no one ends up seeing. Do you think that is like a big part of a worry for a filmmaker, is like wanting to have the widest possible audience and in a sort of cinema environment where you feel like that's not going to happen? Is that kind of dispiriting?
Well, I think maybe if he's comparing himself to, like the late Jean-Marc Vallée or Denis Villeneuve, maybe, he's like, where's my Mattel franchise? How come I can't do like a sexy queer-coded G.I. Joe? I'm ready to go. Let's do this. But I don't think that's what he wants. I mean, I feel like also his films, from just the perspective of art house cinema, I mean, he's one of the most internationally recognized and rewarded and respected auteurs. I mean, certainly that have ever come out of this country.
Yeah. And he's 34.
Yeah. It's like maybe he just needs to, go to Ojai for a bit or something.
Okay. John, let me ask you, Xavier has since backtracked his comments somewhat. Last Thursday on Instagram, he wrote, "Of course, art matters. Of course, cinema isn't a waste of time. Sometimes words are taken out of context and things are lost in translation." And then he posted, he did this 9-page post on Instagram. What did he say in that post?
Then he walked back the walking back. He said
it's very French.
He said, "I've said I wanted to stop making films, and I feel at peace with that decision." So he said his current state of mind and the current state of the world don't inspire him to continue to pursue what was once an inevitable vocation. He said that he has some TV series projects on the go, and he will honor those projects. And he does see himself maybe working on TV series in the future, but currently he doesn't think he will make any more films.
I'll tell you this, I hope he doesn't stop making Adele music videos, because he's so far made 2 of them and they're absolutely incredible. Chandler, it seems like a lot of the frustrations that Xavier is expressing here has to do with the business side of things, the logistics side of things, in terms of getting your movie in front of people. You recently put out your first movie, I Like Movies. The movie's called I Like Movies, I should say. You did that on a limited budget, so you've been going through this kind of process firsthand. What is it like for you as a filmmaker, a first-time filmmaker, to hear someone who's already so accomplished say, you know what, this is just like not worth it?
I mean, it definitely is devastating. Yeah. I think that he's also, I think it's important to recognize that he's also this incredibly, this queer filmmaker and a pioneer for queer cinema in Canada, queer cinema in general. And I think also so much of him as a person and his work is so connected that maybe there's just a personal boredom of like, he's a celebrity, he does Louis Vuitton commercials. He gets free Chanel at shows. So maybe there's just something also about having to embody what you make and have people assess your life and have the films that you make be so personally connected with you that is also a part of the frustration of just not being able to feel free. But yeah, I mean, it is dangerous. I mean, I made a film about a video store, and I don't even know if my movie will ever come out on DVD. So,
right. Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's like it is. The whole world is so shifting, and the way that films are getting disseminated online. I feel like I had a very blessed. I'm so grateful for every experience I got to have with this movie. But I mean, I understand his frustration of this kind of changing distribution landscape. When a couple years ago, Mommy comes out. It's probably a huge watershed film. It probably makes a ton of money at the box office. It gets nominated for major prizes. It travels internationally. And, I think the important context also is that John F. Donovan, his first film that was in English, which had like huge celebrities in it, wasn't kind of the breakthrough movie that
English
maybe he thought it was going to be. It was really critically maligned. It didn't do that well on the box office. People really dismissed it. And that was kind of his moment to really transition into making movies in English. And because of that failure, I think everything in the context of his career from then has kind of crumbled since then. And I interviewed him for The Globe when that movie came out at TIFF. And I remember asking him, like, you've never had a failure before. Do you think that you're ready for it? And he was like, you seem really concerned. I'm not worried about it. But I think this is, he's all filmmakers. We're so sensitive. We just want to be loved, like he says in his Instagram post. He's frustrated with this desire to be loved. And so I think he just can't handle it.
Now, when you look at that kind of direction and saying, okay, this is somebody who has won all this adoration, won all these prizes, made all these films, do you look at that and go, if he is looking further down the road and going, I'm out, does that make you dispirited yourself in terms of like wanting to make more movies?
No, because I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't know how to do anything else, and I'm just getting started. I mean, talk to me 8 years later when I've been to Cannes 6 times, and maybe I'll feel differently.
That's fair. That's fair. Cha, even though he said that he's done with movies, we should say Xavier has left the door open to work more in TV. I think there's a creative reason that might be more attractive, but I think there's actually an industry reason why that might be more attractive to him. What do you make of that?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of directors now going towards TV, even very established directors, where that used to be kind of seemed like a demotion in some sense. But these days it's not at all. There's a lot of money in TV. There's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of space. You can he just made a 5-part series last year, the night that Logan woke up, or LaNuitOùLaurierGaudreaultS'estRéveillé. It was a 5-part thriller. So he got to make this 5-hour series, which, like, for a film, you would never make a 5-hour film. Even a 2-hour film is kind of long. And I think there's also an audience, a kind of captive audience that is there already, or that's watching. So it's very different than getting people out of the theaters. Everybody's on their laptops or on their television. So I think he's into a kind of a structured thing like that, where the audience is already there, and that's something that isn't as taking as much of a big risk for him. So I think maybe that's why he's a bit more open to this.
Jai, if you think a 2-hour movie is long, buddy, we got to go to the movie theater together, because every movie is 3 hours long. Chandler, what do you make of this idea that there's just a bit more of a draw for filmmakers to go into TV and maybe sort of blow up the form a little bit?
Yeah, I think especially if you're sort of an auteur-driven, really personal storyteller like he is, that's has a very signature style and voice and aesthetic that he's almost codified. Maybe the days of having these kind of the way. I mean, I really feel like Xavier's films are kind of in the spirit of like the French New Wave. Like I see him like Truffaut or Godard, but there isn't kind of that cultural landscape anymore. Yeah, and I mean, he's so lucky to live in a country like Quebec that funds artists like him and Mona Chokri and, Stéphane Lafleur, and there's so many, Matthew Rinkin, like with Sodec money, and they all make these really wonderful films. But I just wonder if maybe TV is just a better way to kind of guarantee that you have enough infrastructure to actually pay yourself and the people around you. I mean, that was another thing he said in his statement, that he's never received a director's fee for any of his films, and neither has his producer. And neither did me and my producers. We still haven't been paid for I Like Movies. Yeah. So, I mean, it really is this thing where you're the last person to really support yourself through the art that you make. Yeah.
I got to ask you before I let you go, if we were to lose, Xavier to TV for good, what would Canadian cinema be losing, Chandler?
I think we'd be losing like an incredibly visionary director that is an incredibly beautiful stylist and has amazing instincts with actors and tells really singular, personal, queer stories that like we would lose that voice. And, I think Xavier's style, I mean, as much as it's now been kind of parodied and he has all these kind of stylistic flares to it and stuff, those are Mommy and I Killed My Mother and Les Amours Imaginaires and It's Only the End of the World. Like, these are all really, really amazing movies. And I also think it's important for filmmakers to be able to fail. Yeah. Like, we need to be able to make failures and totally bomb and pick ourselves up from that and go through the process of living and then make art about that. And so I almost think that this hiatus could be the best thing for his career that ever happens to him.
I like that we've taken this story and arrived at a place that's like, you know what? This might be a positive thing. I feel like we've kind of settled a place where we hope that Xavier is going to return to filmmaking at a certain point.
Oh, yeah. He's like Tom Brady. This is...
Retiring 3 times and coming back 4 times. Yeah. I sure hope we continue to see Xavier's movies. Chandler, I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks a lot.
Chandler Levac is a Toronto writer and filmmaker. Her debut feature is called I Like Movies. It's available right now on demand, although word to be seen on the DVD situation. And Cha Dunleavy is a columnist with the Montreal Gazette. They were talking about the Quebec filmmaker Xavier Dolan, who recently said he wants to stop making movies. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and you are listening to Commotion. Listen, I don't know what your TikTok feed is like, but I've consistently noticed that the most positive corner of TikTok seems to be book talk. That's where book people specifically, share their favorite new reads and they talk about the books they're spending time with. And the thing is, book talk tends to be dominated by romance, thriller, and fantasy writing. And TikTok, the company, seems to have noticed this because there are reports that the parent company that owns TikTok, this is a company called ByteDance, they're starting their own book publisher. JL Richardson is an author, literary festival director, and recently joined Book Talk. She's here to talk about what a TikTok run publisher might mean for the book world. JL, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Can I just say before we get into it, I've been saying your name wrong for so long because I'm an Arabic speaker, and so we say Jael, and then you were like, "Hey man, it's JL," and so I just wanted to say sorry about that, JL.
No, I'm all good. I like when people put their flair on it, and it's fine. It's good. It's a Hebrew name actually, so there's all kinds of ways that people pronounce it differently depending on where they're from in the world.
I'm learning new things. Learning new things every day, pal. Also, would like to learn from you your reaction to the idea that TikTok itself might start running a book publishing company.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction was like, why? And then I was like, of course. You know, whenever something is going well in a particular industry, capitalism says I must swallow that and do that and do that also and do that bigger and better and make money off of it too. So it doesn't surprise me. I think the approach is really like what's got me kind of puzzled and confused or interested, I guess. You know, from what I've read, they approached some romance writers, some self-published romance writers online and just kind of made a generic appeal. It wasn't like, hey, Sally, I really like your work and we'd really like to, you know, make you one of our first authors. It was sort of, generalized. The advance was only $3,500. That kind of piqued my interest as well, because in big book publishing, that's actually a very small advance. And it says to me a little bit that they're hedging their bets. They don't really know how this is going to go. And they're kind of like playing it safe in a way. Even like romance and thrillers tend to do well, but I think romance is the safer choice in that regard. You know, there's nothing too scary, too wild, too, you know, and I think that's what sparks my interest about this decision. I think they're trying to get into the game with the lowest hanging fruit and the lowest stakes. And that's curious.
Well, I was going to say, so it's basically the New York Times reported that, you know, a bunch of authors would just get like an email from this publisher called Eighth Note Press. It's kind of like a tap on the shoulder, like, hey, you've been chosen. You know, we want you to be a part of this thing. Would it have made sense for them to go big and spend the $50,000, $60,000 advances? Or does it make more sense for them to say, you know what, we don't know if you're going to be big, but you might be. So here's a small amount and like, let's see how this pans out.
I mean, it's definitely the smarter, safer choice. Right. I think it would have been curious if they had sort of hedged their bets on one or two authors that they really liked. It makes me question, like, have they read the work of those authors? Or are they just looking at their TikToks and saying like, maybe you, or maybe you, or maybe you. I don't care what your words say. And that's the thing that piques my interest.
So the thing about this whole thing is that we also have to talk about the ecosystem that is Book Talk, because Book Talk has been one of the most successful sort of places within the realm of TikTok itself. It's also just nice to live there. You know, most of my feed is like Book Talk or Taylor Swift TikToks. Like that's really the stuff that I get served up from the algorithm. You've been on TikTok for a couple of months now. To give people, I guess, like a sense of what Book Talk is like, here's Tasneem Geedy's most recent video. She's a Toronto nursing student who has over 140,000 followers on TikTok. Listen to this.
Hello, I read like 11-ish books this month, not bad for a sad girl, so here's my rapid fire of whether they were worth it or not. Starting off with the disappointment of the month, maybe the year. I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong. The writing style was beautiful. The plot, the vision, it was there. I just felt like she scratched the surface with what she could have done with this book. If there's ever a show, hit me up. But the book, I don't know. The one book that surprised me this month was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Usually her books gave me like a number 8 in the Ick scale. It gave me number 3 this time. I love the conversation on like exploiting students in academia. I see it happen all the time. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
First of all, shout out to Tasneem for reading 11 books this month. I'm wildly impressed. So that's like a 90-second video. It's a rapid fire video. That's a bunch of reviews from Tasneem that she posted last month. It has like 70,000 views. What do you think it is, JL, that makes Book Talk so appealing?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that publishing struggles with marketing. They produce a ton of books and they don't know how to get them out to people and how necessarily to get them to buy it. So I think what happened with Book Talk is that it created a new space that was actually working. And so people leaped into the space. And Tasneem, what's great about Tasneem is she reads 11 books a month. Over 100 books a year. So when you're looking for what am I going to read next, you're going to go over to Tasneem and say, okay, she's read a bunch of things. I just want to read one. And you're going to listen to these reviews and sort of decide based on her recommendations. And it's such a fascinating space because it's so different from Instagram. When you did Bookstagram, you had to be practically a professional photographer to lay out your book on the table and decorate it and get sort of viral photo. But in TikTok, you can be in your bathroom with bad lighting and just tell about the books that you read, and it can go viral. It can get lots of views like Tasneem's does, and that can lead to actual sales differences.
So let's talk about that, because it seems like at least the publishing world seems to be a bit invested in this idea that Book Talk can make a difference in terms of the sales of books. Do we know anything about how viral book recommendations actually end up translating to book sales?
Yeah, I mean, there's been huge Book Talk successes. Colleen Hoover in the States is probably one of the biggest. She's considered the queen of TikTok.
They call her Coho. I can't believe that she has a short form. Exactly. Yes.
And there's Canadian Jiran J. Zhao, who wrote The Iron Widow, who's done very well through TikTok. There are a number of authors who have done well in that space, who've had sort of viral videos. My curiosity in studying it myself and being on TikTok is how much of external marketing is required to go viral as well, or having your own social media following in other platforms. Jiran J. Zhao had other places that they were doing well in, and it sort of also translated and expanded through TikTok. And so it's kind of an unpredictable space to me personally. I don't think what happened with Colleen Hoover is that a college student posted a video of one of her book covers and that video went viral. And the video was just the cover for 10 seconds, right? You go and show anyone else's book cover for 10 seconds and there's no guarantee it's going to go viral. So it is not this guaranteed space where, A plus B equals C. It's sort of something you have to figure out and play around with. And that's, I think, what makes this also concerning, right? Because if TikTok's going into this space with their own books, how does that, impact what else is out there, what's coming virally or organically?
Well, I was going to say, is that the worry here? As you kind of look towards the future, the idea that TikTok might be getting into the universe of publishing, is the worry then that TikTok starts to favor its own publishers and pushing them up the algorithm and in sort of at the expense of other publishers? Is that the idea?
Everybody's trying to figure out the algorithm. Everybody's trying to master it. Everybody's trying to make it work in their favor. And if the company that owns the social media is producing their own books, they're obviously going to leverage their own titles over others. They're going to push Book Talk of their own over organically driven stories.
Maybe about 30 seconds here. We just got to say, JL, there are certain genres and tropes that are popular on TikTok. It's dominated by romance, fantasy, and thriller. Do you have a sense that in the industry, there's suddenly this pressure to write books that go viral on TikTok?
Yeah, I think that whenever something's doing well, there's a pressure for some people who are focused on book sales, especially publishers, to feed into that, to feed the dragon and make money off those interests. And I think what I would say, especially to writers, is to just write what you love, write what works for you, and let the algorithm sort itself out.
That's, generally speaking, that's the best advice. JL, thanks so much for being on the show. It's so good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. JL Richardson is the author of Gutter Child. She's also the executive director of Fold, the Festival of Literary Diversity. She's in Brampton, Ontario. And that is it for our show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Remember, you can listen to any episode of Commotion that you missed anytime you like, wherever you get your podcast. Hey, I'm going to be here tomorrow. I hope that you're going to be here because we have a stack show where we're going to talk about Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible. It's going to be a good day. I'll see you then.